8. 1964 Jaguar E-Type. The 1964 Jaguar E-Type is considered by many to be one of the most beautiful cars ever made. With its curved lines and signature frame, it was capable of reaching speeds of 150 miles per hour. Even rival carmaker Enzo Ferrari believed that the Jaguar was the epitome of elegance. Enzo Ferrari, along with most other classic car enthusiasts, would have been shocked at the state of a 1964 Jaguar E-Type coupe that was discovered abandoned in a barn in 2016. It was no longer the beauty that it once was. But that's what happens when a car sits in a barn for over 40 years. The vehicle's scarlet red paintwork could barely be seen through the thick layer of rust and dirt that accumulated on its exterior. The chrome work, once gleaming, was now dull and caked in grime. And that was just the outside of the car. Who knows what condition it was in under the hood? But who would let such an automotive treasure fester away in a barn? The 1964 E-Type was purchased as a present for the owner's wife in 1970. She drove the sports car for approximately 5 years before it was left in a barn following the birth of their first child. At that point, they felt like a more family-friendly vehicle would be more appropriate for them. Even though it was never driven again, the family couldn't face the thought of parting with it. And so it sat forgotten until the owner died, which was when it was finally rediscovered again. In October 2016, shortly after it was found, the Jaguar was auctioned off by H&H Classics in London. Despite its condition, it sold for an incredible $80,800, equivalent to almost $100,000. The new owner definitely has a big task ahead of them, as the cost of restoration will almost certainly be more than the auction price. 7. The abandoned animatronics. In 1989, the Cranium Command exhibit at Epcot was installed in the Wonders of Life Pavilion, offering tourists an educational journey through the human brain. The two characters in Cranium Command were General Knowledge and Buzzy. General Knowledge was a drill sergeant-type figure who would brief visitors on the goal before entering the ride. Buzzy was a tiny soldier, learning how to pilot the body of a 12-year-old kid who would guide them through the attraction while they were enjoying the experience. Cranium Command was always overshadowed by its fellow attraction, Body Wars, which instead of the brain focused on taking guests around the rest of the human body. Over time, Cranium Command moved from being a permanent attraction to a seasonal one in 2003. Then, in 2007, it finally closed for good, leaving the ride and its animatronics abandoned. This was unusual for the resort at the time. Typically, closed-down attractions would be dismantled quickly to avoid people trying to explore them, and props and animatronics would usually be incorporated into other rides to reuse them. But because the ride was left to decay in the park, it became frequented by the occasional urban explorer for over a decade. And in 2018, the resort claimed that Buzzy had disappeared. An ex-employee turned urban explorer was arrested after posting a picture of the animatronic's face on their Twitter account. However, this didn't lead to any prosecutions. To this day, Buzzy hasn't been found, leaving many to speculate on where the animatronic ended up. 6. Colin's Barn. Colin's Barn was an odd hobbit-like building that was constructed by a farmer in the 1980s to shelter his sheep. It's currently abandoned in the middle of nowhere in Chedlow, England. This isn't just some casual door in a hillside either. The structure is made entirely out of stone and has 2 stories, making it more of a hobbit castle than a hobbit hut. It apparently took 11 years for farmer Colin Stokes to build by hand. The barn is complete with towers, elaborate handmade stained glass windows, sculpted plaster details on the inside, and other features such as birdhouses for flying visitors. But what caused such an amazing construction to be abandoned? Colin Stokes used to own and farm the property, even sleeping on the 2nd floor of it during lambing season to look after his flock. Sadly though, he sold it all when a quarry was built nearby, threatening to disrupt the calm surroundings he loved. Stokes relocated to Scotland in the year 2000 to begin a new millennium with a fresh new start. Over 20 years after Colin Stokes left his creation, it still stands today. It continues to entertain urban explorers that come to see it, and it puts the small Wiltshire community of Chedlow on the map. 5. A labyrinth of books. There's a street in Tunis, Tunisia that's famous for its antique bookstores, known as Dabaghine Street. However, the people of Tunis aren't exactly all that big on reading, leading to an amazing abandoned treasure trove that would be any book lover's delight. In one of the many bookshops, the ground floor might look normal, but if you gain access to the upstairs floor, you'll find a labyrinth of old abandoned books. The sheer amount of titles is stacked up on top of each other to create a wall of books that reaches the ceiling. They even creep around the staircase up to the top floor, meaning that you need to watch your step wherever you go. In some places, you'll need to tiptoe around them and squeeze through tiny gaps. Every genre imaginable can be found here, with children's picture books nestled next to literary classics. One thing is for sure though, if they fell on top of you, you'd quite easily be buried under the landslide of paperbacks. We don't know whether there's any plans to get rid of the books, either by throwing them away, donating them, or selling them. So for now, the abandoned library simply continues to grow. If you were offered $10,000, would you spend the night in a haunted abandoned amusement park by yourself? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. 4. The abandoned cars of Dubai. Dubai has a serious car culture, as does the United Arab Emirates in general, with a particular taste for the latest and best in high-end supercars. But what happens when you can't afford to keep your luxury motor going anymore? The answer in Dubai seems to be abandon them. Cars like Ferraris, Mercedes, and other luxury brands are left in airport car parks or on the side of the road, simply gathering dust. Thanks to the desert environment, this dust and sand buildup is pretty impressive, making it easy for passers-by to leave messages and pictures on the vehicles. But what would force so many people to have to abandon such expensive automobiles? Dubai, like the rest of the globe, has fallen on hard times. A few years ago, Dubai was an investor's paradise, filled with opportunity thanks to the booming oil and property markets. Many foreign investors moved to the city in order to take advantage of the huge possibilities for growth. And what better way to showcase their new wealth than by purchasing a supercar or two? But the dream couldn't last for long, and the global economic crisis led to many people losing their fortunes. As a result, they simply couldn't keep their cars. And because lots of people were in similar situations, it meant that there was no market for them to be sold. Many people have been left in desperate financial straits as a result of the economy crashing. With mounting debts that they were unable to repay, thousands of families started to leave Dubai as quickly as they could. Therefore, their cars would be left to decay at airports or on the side of the road. Sometimes the vehicle owners would leave apology notes on the windscreen of the cars that they left behind, and some were in such a hurry that they even left the keys in the ignition. Dubai has since started to seize cars that have been left for months on end, although at times they can barely keep up with the amount of vehicles that have been left abandoned around the city. The cars that are collected are then auctioned off. So if you've ever wanted a supercar for cheap, it's the perfect chance to buy one. 3. The airplane in Antarctica. On October 8, 1970, a Lockheed Constellation Pegasus plane crash landed into the icy tundra of Antarctica after flying through severe weather conditions, leaving it with no other choice. Severe winds managed to rip the right engine mount and even the propeller from the aircraft. Thankfully, no one was hurt during the crash, but the plane was left where it fell, and over the next few decades it sat abandoned. However, the Lockheed Pegasus does have its own legacy. The icy, flat area where the plane crashed is now called the Pegasus White Ice Runway. It even has its own handmade sign. The site is now an Antarctic tourist attraction, with many people venturing out to take a look at the aircraft, some of them even scratching their initials into the fuselage. Thanks to the cold conditions, the Pegasus is still in great condition and hasn't rusted or decayed in the same way other planes around the world would typically deteriorate. And because of its location, it's most likely the most southerly piece of graffiti in the world. 2. The abandoned ammunition plant trucks. In Sydney, Nebraska, a World War II ammunition plant sits abandoned. That was until Rob Van Vliet took over the site and turned it into an automotive treasure trove. The Rob Van Vliet collection, as it's now known, is made up of between 1,500 to 1,800 vehicles. In fact, there's so many that even Rob himself has lost track of how many cars and trucks he has on the lot. All of the vintage vehicles here look abandoned, with many of them in derelict condition. However, there are some true treasures to be found here if you know where to look. If you like the classic Diamond T, there's many of them here in all shapes and sizes, including a semi and a wrecker truck. You can also find International Harvester pickup trucks, a rare vintage discovery. Some of the trucks were sold at auction in 2022, such as a 1937 REO Speedwagon pickup, a 1915 Stewart motor truck, and a 1937 Studebaker K10 Coupe Express pickup. Some of the Diamond T trucks were also sold at the same time, including a one-of-a-kind truck that was custom-built and designed for the Canadian distiller Seagram's. There were also Ford trucks, Chevys, and vintage cars from the 1930s too. But since the owner isn't even sure what's in the lot, who knows what other abandoned vehicles might be lurking in this massive car yard. 1. 42 former presidents. You might expect to see stone figures of former presidents at Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, but you can find an entire field of them abandoned in Virginia. In a field near Williamsburg are the statues of 42 former presidents that have been sitting in the location since 2010, but why would they be left here? The statues were originally part of the President's Park installation in the town. The park was created in 2004 by local landowner Everett Haley Newman and Houston sculptor David Addix, who was deeply influenced to make the massive busts after driving by Mount Rushmore. At a cost of $10 million, the park was an open-air museum of sorts, with visitors invited to freely walk around the grounds and view the carved stone statues of past political leaders. The park would only be open for 6 short years before it was forced to close due to a lack of visitors in 2010. Howard Hankins, who'd helped construct the park when it was first opened, was contacted by Newman again, but this time he wanted to destroy the statues as the land had been foreclosed on. Hankins was reluctant to let all his hard work go to waste. Plus, taking a sledgehammer or bulldozer to a president's face, even a stone one, didn't seem all that appealing. Instead, he suggested that the statues, all 42 of them, be moved to some farmland that he owned in order to keep them safe until he figured out what to do with them. Newman agreed, and Hankins began the arduous task of transporting all of the heavy, 22,000-pound presidential busts into the field, where they've been ever since. But it wasn't exactly smooth sailing when it came to moving the statues to their new home. A crane had to remove each bust off its foundation, shattering the sculpture's neck to raise the entire piece off the ground. The presidents were then hoisted into flatbed trucks and carried away to Hankins' farm. As a result, many of the statues bear battle scars from their transition, especially those that were moved first while Hankins and his team were still figuring out how to transport them. Many of them now have broken noses and cracked features, and ironically the statue of Abraham Lincoln is missing the back of his head. It's not just the move that's affected the statues, as the weather's also taken its toll. Ronald Reagan bears a mark from a lightning strike, and many others appear to be crying from the water that's pooled and dried in and around their features over time. The site isn't open to the public, though many have commented on it as they've driven by, and braver explorers have found ways to get onto the property to have a closer look at the statues. For now, these statues remain where they are, although Hankins hopes he can find a new home for them soon. He plans to work with local governments in order to rebuild President's Park into a bigger and better venture. Which one of these abandoned finds did you think was the most surprising? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!